Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and someone's getting feedback from me. It's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to the opening keynote of Library 2.021, Reinventing Libraries for a Post-COVID World. We're so delighted that you're joining us. We have Ellyssa Kroski here as our moderator, Chris Jacobs, Junior Tidal, Tanner Adams, and Loraine Walker. Special thanks to San Jose State University, our founding partner for the conference series. At this moment, we're going to turn some time over to Dr. Sandra Hirsch, who will welcome us and say hello. Dr. Hirsch.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Hirsch, Associate Dean for Academics in the College of Professional and Global Education at San Jose State University. And on behalf of the San Jose State University School of Information, I am very pleased to welcome you to this Library 2.0 conference focused on reinventing libraries for a post-COVID world. The COVID-19 pandemic forced all of us to reevaluate how we do things, and libraries had to pivot and to bring their services, resources, and events into the virtual realm. I am very excited today that today's mini conference will be focused on some of the creative ways that libraries are reinventing themselves. And I want to give a special thank you to our partner, Ellyssa Kroski, who helped us put together this outstanding conference today. San Jose State University iSchool is very proud to sponsor this important discussion, and I look forward to hearing the inspiring stories and learning new approaches that we can use to move into a post-pandemic new normal. So welcome, everyone. We're really pleased to be here today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm very happy to be here today as well. And we have a terrific panel of speakers for you today, and I'm going to give them each a chance to introduce themselves.
And shall we go in order, Ellyssa?
Yeah, that was. Like,
let's start with Chris.
Oh, of course. No. Hey, everybody. My name is Chris Jacobs. I am the Teen Technology Coordinator here at the central location of the Boston Public Library. I actually, I'll not just restate my bio here, but I actually come to librarianship from the world of education. Prior to being a teen tech coordinator, I was actually an English teacher at Massachusetts high schools, all public schools, for 6 years, and sort of came at my instruction in a very tech forward way, and so ended up in this amazing position at an amazing teen center in Copley Square, for any of you who have visited. My particular role post-COVID or during COVID and post-COVID is sort of starting what we call affectionately our teen gaming crew. We pivoted quite quickly into offering online gaming services via a public Twitch channel. For those of you who don't know, I'll probably explain a little bit about what that is in the future. And we actually, during that span of time where we were offering exclusively virtual services, we also started an exclusive teens YouTube channel for Boston Public Library as well. So a lot of my face is on that. Apologies in advance, but that's my intro for right now.
Thank you, Chris. Junior, can we go to you next?
Sure. So my name is Junior Tidal. I am the Web Services and Multimedia Librarian for the New York City College of Technology. And my role during COVID was to assist students with streaming video. But since our library was closed, like so many others, one of the things that we kind of collaborated on was to create a podcast, which we use to highlight library news and services, and to kind of bring the library to our patrons and our students in a different and creative way. So our podcast is called City Tech Stories, and I host it with my colleague, Professor Nora Almeida. And it's been a great experience. Not only do we get to highlight what we do in the library, but we also get to highlight the different voices in our library, including some of our librarians and also like researchers. And I think it's a good way to connect with others since our physical location is closed. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Junior. Tanner, how about you?
Hi, I'm Tanner Adams, and I'm the adult librarian at Parker Williams Library out in Houston, Texas. So what I've been doing, I was hired initially to take charge of the ESL program, which we have a very large ESL and citizenship program at Parker Williams. But one of the things that I've enjoyed, especially over COVID, is we've been playing a completely online game of Dungeons and Dragons. So I'll kind of give in a nutshell. If you've never heard of it, if you've never played it, you should. It's fun. It's a role-playing game where you have one person. Oh, yeah, nice. We have some fans in the audience. Very cool. It's a game where you have a group of players who make up a fantasy character or whatever the genre may be. And you have one person who is the dungeon master or the referee or whatever, and they narrate the story. So having that continuously run online has been really successful. And it's also just been something, exactly, roll for initiative. Someone gets it, someone gets it. It's been a really great experience, and having it be online means that I'm no longer limited to the people living in the immediate area around my library. So in addition to that, doing ESL and citizenship over the internet has been fun and somewhat trying. So thank you.
We're going to hear from each of them quite a bit. So thanks for being so good and so brief. Loraine, you're our final pitch.
Hi, I'm Loraine Walker. I'm the Children's Services Librarian at the Starkville Public Library in Starkville, Mississippi. What I did when the pandemic started, I think maybe the third week, is I had gotten all these text messages and Facebook messages from my parents of my kiddos saying how much they missed story time. And of course, I was quite confident the pandemic was going to last 2 to 3 weeks max. So, which turned out not to be the case, of course. But I said, okay, well, I'm going to go out and do videos. And Miss Rainey promised her children that I would post one every day until we could come back and have story time in person. Well, of course, that ended up being over a year. But I did something a little different. I normally use puppets in the libraries, which the kids loved, but I wondered how I was going to keep their attention. Luckily, we've got family members that have a ranch and other family members that own a pumpkin patch and have some other animals. So I just went out on the farms with horses, goats, llamas, cows. I've done baby skunks, peacocks, just about any animal you can imagine. And I would have pigs. And so whatever animal I did, I had a corresponding book. And the kids thought I was reading to the animals and they were just watching. And I still do videos every week or so, but I've been doing in-person story times now, but the animals are such a hit. I'm bringing live animals to my story time now. So I had a ball python yesterday, and I had a goat last week. So anyway, that is how I've been surviving the pandemic.
Terrific. Thank you to each of you. So we have a series of questions for our panelists. We've encouraged them to actually talk to each other. So I'm going to ask a question and then I'm going to allow them each to kind of respond and work with each other, and we'll get through as much as we can, but I think you're going to love this. So Loraine, we'll start with you. What have been the biggest challenges during the COVID era? And were there challenges that you think were especially unique to libraries?
Well, the biggest challenges, of course, were not being able to see my children in person, not being able to interact with them. I did end up doing to-go bags later on, as I got my footing, I did STEAM science to go bags and STEAM art to go bags. So they did have something to do at home. And then the parents would send me pictures and things like that. So I got a little interaction, but yeah, the hardest part was even when we got back to curbside was just the fact that we didn't have interaction with our patrons. And it's hard to serve them in the manner that we really want to without that, face to face. It's hard to do it over email, to do it over text. You really need to talk to them, help them, and for me as the children's librarian, I say I'm like Tinkerbell is with applause. I need to see those little smiling faces to keep going. So anyway.
I feel like in the school world, there was sort of a mandated continuance, and there was a lot of support for tech and helping people figure the tech out. But in the library world, I sense that there was a fair amount of not knowing kind of what to do and how to move forward. Does anybody want to comment on that? Do you think that was an accurate perception?
Oh, definitely. I think that it seemed to come so suddenly that we were, I don't know, I'm sure for many of y'all working from home, just having to take these programs and services that you, of course, are used to having in person, and suddenly saying, okay, well, that thing you did in person, you need to move it online, and like you have a week to get it ready. So I think that for many people, learning how to use the technology was probably the most significant challenge, and to make sure everyone's on the same page, make sure if you have a meeting that's online, that everybody knows what program you're using, how to get on there, do you have a webcam and a camera and all that. So I think that was probably a pretty difficult thing to start with.
Yeah, I was going to echo Tanner's statements. Like, I feel like it's a real learning curve to providing like virtual services for a lot of our patrons, and just kind of keeping, in mind of how they connect to the internet, because I know that our students who are mostly commuters here in the New York City area, a lot of them, they don't have great access to broadband. Actually, their point of connection is using cell phones. So it's, you always have to kind of be like aware of that and aware of where they are, if they're like, connecting in like a crowded apartment, or if they're just, they have limited access due to the technology that they have, that they may not even have a camera. And things like that. So not just them connecting, but also like assisting them and helping them connect to library services, I think was also like a big hurdle for us.
I'll hook on to that if that's okay. An interesting sort of anecdote from my early experience was we actually had a pretty prepared, or Boston Public Schools had a pretty prepared sort of reaction in getting teens, particularly high schoolers and middle schoolers, one-to-one sort of ready, and they had distribution centers, and they were able to get Chromebooks into the hands of the vast majority of, at least I believe, 6 through 12 kids who would be the primary contingent that I would be servicing as a teen librarian. But one of the things that we found out very, very early on, well, not as early as we would have wanted, was that we had set up what's called a Discord server. Some of you guys might be familiar with sort of this online platform, Discord, to try to really construct a virtual teen room using that tech platform. And we were so excited because we knew that these kids were going to, at the very least, be outfitted with the Chromebook. And then lo and behold, the Boston Public School System has, exercises a certain amount of control on the websites and the platforms that those Chromebooks can visit. So we thought, oh, great, they have the tech. And then we found out, and it took a few weeks, I'm a little ashamed to say, but we found out that they couldn't access the platform that we were using. So they had the tech, they had the power, but they did not have the permissions.
Did any of you find that you were not as capable of reaching a particular audience that would use the library than did you realize, oh my gosh, we don't really have a good way of communicating with this group of people?
Yes and
Well,
no. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, being in a rural area and where a lot of people are below the poverty line, like she said, a lot of the children, they were issued Chromebooks. We almost immediately, the library became a hotspot and offered wireless. Our parking lots would be packed day and night with people just parked outside. But still, there were tons of people who don't have transportation to get there, don't have way, they have these books, they don't have ways, especially people that live in the county, out in, rural areas, just don't have access to the internet. And we put all my videos on Facebook, which is really the lowest common denominator to, access that people could get on. And the schools did allow that. And they couldn't get on YouTube and they couldn't get on several other things, but they could get on Facebook. And we got around copyright issues, a lot of copyright issues, by putting it solely on Facebook and not on YouTube. But yeah, the library becoming a hotspot was a major help, but still there were a ton we couldn't reach just because they didn't have access to internet.
I'll sort of leap off of that and reveal that, as a system, I think, and again, I apologize for having a very tight focus on the teen demographic, but that's sort of my world. And what I discovered is that we really did not have access to communication avenues to them. We had some teen social media accounts that we had sort of like, invested, I want to say, a little bit half-heartedly into. And as a system, we were very conscientious about not recording and not taking email addresses and not trying to aggregate all this information and compile data on these teens, which I think is a very, as I've learned, it's a very library thing to, do. And yet we were left in somewhat of a lurch because, how do you find the teens when you don't have, any avenues? You have the avenues perhaps to connect to them, but they don't know that you're trying to reach out to them. And you don't have that sort of massed information, at your disposal that, say, a school system does. That was a huge, I want to say, hurdle for us. And I feel like it remained a hurdle for us for the entire pandemic. Largely the kids who were finding out about us either on Twitch or they were finding out from their parents, much like many children's libraries, kind of operate, which I find really interesting.
There's a comment in the chat from Bernice. She says, we did pretty well with picking up communications with those that were online. Our communication problems were those that were not on the internet at all, which we have many. We started a delivery system to people who were normally served by our bookmobile as soon as we could safely do so, and started phoning patrons that were not online. So I'm wondering, have your library services changed in permanent ways because you've discovered that you weren't connecting like you thought you were? Or are there other ways in which you think that you've done things that will be permanent changes?
We've, like I mentioned before, we have a large number of ESL classes. And just trying to have that continue over the pandemic was, I would say that there were some difficulties because you have to consider that your volunteers may not be willing to have classes over online. You may have volunteers that may not have access. You may have students that don't have access to the technology. So I think it was a matter of figuring out what works for everyone. I've had ESL classes with people that were completely over the phone. So to go back to what you had said, permanent, these changes, some of them may be permanent as classes will continue to happen online. We have some students that prefer having classes online. So I just wanted them to know that that was always an option, that just because we may be moving towards having in-person classes doesn't mean that you can't continue to have them over the phone, and you can't continue to have online services and programs alongside your in-person ones.
Yeah, I think some of our changes have, on a similar note, have been more for online and virtual services, like a lot of online reference, definitely. We've increased a lot of online reference, and I feel like there's more of a need for that because, my college, I don't think we're going to be wholly open in the fall, maybe in the spring, but I think it's going to be like a hybrid like model. So it's going to be more reliance on online reference as well as more reliance on like ebooks as well, which I also feel like that also leads to like more tutorials, right? As you all mentioned, like you'll need to kind of transmit that knowledge to our patrons on how to use ebooks or how to search for ebooks or use those technologies. So I think a big part of that is, using video tutorials and research guides and even podcasts too, to help instruct those different modalities so patrons can learn those technologies in different ways. So I think those are going to be the more permanent things that are going to be happening after this pandemic.
Go ahead, please.
A permanent change we've implemented is that we are going to continue a virtual story time. It was a need, we met a need we didn't know we had. Classrooms were using my story times, not just in Mississippi, but all over the country and the world. I mean, I did it to service my community, but it's wonderful that people were able to use it everywhere. And also, there were people that, even in our own community, for one reason or another, like couldn't make it into the library. I mean, sometimes kids just have a meltdown. Parents were very thankful to have it, and parents were glad. I mean, I have one family that they have probably rewatched one 100 times where the goat knocks over my camera and their son thinks I fall over. And he just laughs and laughs. So when he's throwing a temper tantrum, they put on the one where Miss Rainey falls over, and it delights the children. But a big thing, and this has become personal to me, there are a lot of immunocompromised children in the community that I hadn't thought about before, that haven't been able to make it into the library and throughout the country, and they're able to watch these story times and enjoy them when they're not able to come into a library setting, so they can feel a part of story time and a part of the library, even though they're not able to physically come in. So it showed us we had a need that wasn't being met, and now it's a permanent part. And Chris, to jump on what you were saying, our teen librarian, Rachel, started using Remind for her teens, where it stores all the information. She can't access it and see it, but she can send them messages about everything she's doing. Like when she has something coming up, and they can, like one girl sends her memes every day, and she can send a meme back and they can interact, but she doesn't actually have the girl's phone number or information. So that's like a cool thing. And that was how she wouldn't have used that or had that if, the pandemic hadn't started. So these are things we're integrating permanently.
Yeah, I'll hook on to that also. And I think, what I hope beyond anything else is that, and I know that there's a mini conference on this, I think being conducted very shortly after our panel, but that we can successfully make the argument to continue to explore virtual as a permanent mainstay for a couple of reasons, one of which being the concept of permanence that Loraine was talking about, the idea that somebody interacting with a program that has been recorded is engagement, is an interaction, even though it's not happening live. And it has perhaps not as much value as if Loraine were to fall over in front of you, but the idea is like, that it still has value. No, that was my attempt at a joke. But the idea is also that we have yet to really so Boston Public, the BPL system actually just reopened to patron services sort of in full. We have a reduced schedule this past Monday, if you can believe that. And the idea that we have yet to sort of realize two things, I think. Number one, if it's it's possibility to create hybrid programming that exists on a virtual and a physical spectrum simultaneously. Tanner, I'd be interested in your ideas about, a D&D where half of it's in-house and half of it's online. But the idea that also, we don't want to lose the momentum that we've built and the communities that we've built around online. And I think that, in many ways, in having to advocate in my system for the continuation of certain virtual programs, I find myself feeling like I'm really advocating for an existing community because we've been doing this for so many months. It feels like letting go of that is retrogression in a lot of different ways.
I definitely agree with you on there, especially if you have an online community such as Discord, which we use for our games. You don't want to, so when I started the D&D club, it was pretty much from scratch because it was supposed to be an in-person program and it was just as COVID was starting to come down. So I kind of had to start over from scratch. And to speak in general, if you have a good online community, then there's, if you can figure out a way to make it a hybrid program, then I think there's no reason to have to start all over again. You don't want to have to say to the people that were joining you online, all right, see ya, we'll have to, we got to make it in person. So, make room or whatever. I think that it can be a good way to, especially because if you're having a program online, it can be anyone from anywhere in the world.
I feel like the advent of the internet created a circumstance in which there was massive amount of information. There were all kinds of privacy issues. There was the need to understand how to sort and filter and evaluate content. That libraries should have been at the forefront and the center of most of that and weren't in an interesting way. Do you think that this period of time has given libraries a chance to become more relevant? Has that happened?
I think it's definitely pushed libraries that may have been behind in technology. They've had to catch up. I know a couple small town libraries that have done things virtually that would have never done them. And I've got to tell you, I would have never done virtual story times if it weren't for the pandemic. I would have, just bopped along in the children's room. And I think I think this is the silver lining of the pandemic for us. I think it's made us more relevant. I truly think it's made libraries more relevant. And I think it's made our community see the importance of libraries more. First of all, not having the libraries for a while, they realized what they missed. And also, since we've increased our services, especially all of our online and virtual offerings, we had so many people sign up for library cards when we were closed because we had Hoopla at one point. Now we're Libby and Overdrive. So they could get ebooks, audiobooks, and movies when we weren't doing curbside yet. And, people were starved for, new content, and we were able to provide it. It was truly amazing. We were signing them up and emailing them their library card number and PIN number and letting them, download the apps and log in, and they were able to download we have a library app and log in once we did curbside, and they could place their holds. So a lot of Tech-Adverse patrons became experts at using the Startful Library app. They were placing holds like pros. They were, ready. They loved the curbside. So I truly think it made us more relevant to the community.
Any other thoughts?
I'll speak quickly just on something. So, I'm cresting 40 at this point, and I find myself sort of as new, particularly like I call them sort of youth technologies, particularly in social media, come up, I find myself feeling more and more estranged. I'm sure some of us have experienced that in our life. You know, the trending thing right now is something that we just don't understand for whatever reason, and sort of finding myself on Twitch, which is, you know, it's a platform, it's a social media platform that, you know, doesn't necessarily exclude, you know, people who are my age, but you know, certainly is more dominated by, I think, slightly younger folks, and in some cases very younger folks. I found it interesting to understand that how I learned sort of the parlance of that was through the patrons that were attending our virtual programs on Twitch, particularly our younger patrons who understood that platform and the culture of that platform better than I did. And I found it interesting how much I learned from them, you know what I mean, from just being on the platform, that I learned what kind of content they wanted, certainly, and how to serve them best on Twitch, but also how to sort of speak Twitch and how to maintain, you know, the duties of being a host while having, you know, people engage in chat moderation. It was very interesting to kind of navigate that and to understand that the teens in particular that we work with are actually already there in a lot of cases with regards to the tech. And in particular, it sort of was a call to action, I think, for us to sort of say, well, you know what, I can sit there and stare at the 4 and the 10 digit of my age all I want, but it doesn't, as a teen librarian, it doesn't excuse me from needing to kind of learn some of the parlance and some of the places that these teens are, even if it's a place where I might be uncomfortable. I sort of have a responsibility to at least know about it, if not invest in trying to build programming out of it.
That's awesome.
I'm sorry. Most definitely. I think it's one thing to use media, to use Facebook, use Twitter, but it's quite another thing to figure out what kind of content you want to see there. For example, you know, videos on Facebook, you want to make sure that they are to the point, you know, to learn about how to use it, not just properly, but correctly in a way that will serve whatever audience that you're looking for. So I really liked your point on that.
And to know that we can stand as a, sorry, Steve, I saw you come up, but I think also like to know that we can stand as sort of a bastion of neutrality, safety in those spaces, you know, that are dominated by personality, influence, commercialism, et cetera, a library in that space, I think speaks to maybe a need for that kind of base neutrality, judgment-free, ness. That's not a word, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. Like, I think there is a need for, or at least I've understood that there is an emergent need for those spaces to exist in these platforms in which, you know, as we all understand, you know, they can be unfriendly, they can be, you know, a little bit judgment heavy, they can be acerbic. It's, you know, it was an interesting kind of, I'm not speaking about it in the past tense. It remains an interesting kind of, question, you know, are libraries needed online? You know what I mean? Like in this context. And by library, I mean culturally what we are as a space. Is that, you know, there's a value inherent to that I think is something that keeps me going and thinking like we've got to keep this virtual thing afloat.
Yeah, there's a history in libraries of independent intellectual inquiry that's done in privacy, right, without judgment. And in an increasingly online world, it's hard to think about how to continue to support that in the ways that could have been done physically. I just want to make a quick note. There are a couple of people who have left questions, sort of specific questions in the Q&A, and I don't think we're going to get to those specific questions, but you can always click through the link to the description of the sessions and in Library 2.0. And you can ask questions directly in the Library 2.0 community to presenters there. I'm interested if any of you saw creative experiments that weren't in your own library that you thought, wow, that's really going to be good moving forward.
Well, something that we are currently working on that I've seen many, many libraries adopt throughout the pandemic is story walks. Um, we've gotten we've gotten funding and permission that for a park that's being built right now for a permanent story walk, and we're working on a story walk that will be a pop-up and go to different parks and neighborhoods. So that was something really interesting. It was a new concept for me that I heard about a few months ago, that libraries had put up outside. It was something children that could participate in. And I mean, it's just a great idea. And it's something that we're planning to do in Starkville. I mean, over the next 5 years, we're going to put in several permanent ones and, change them out every month or so. And that's going to change the landscape of all our parks. And again, I would have never heard about it, or I might not have heard about it for years if it hadn't been for the pandemic. And, libraries adopted all these pop-up, I think they just use real estate signs and regular books. And people are just so creative everywhere. I mean, it astounds me what librarians can do when they put their mind to something, trying to reach out to the kids, whether they're young or they're teens. Like Chris was saying, immersing yourself in their world. And Tanner, reaching out. And just to let you know, Tanner, I have some friends that had a D&D wedding that was amazing.
A little jealous, but
yeah, no,
going.
they met in a group. They met
That's kind of
and
awesome.
it's just when you find the special way to connect with them, and it's just, I've seen, you see all these things online, and what y'all are talking about, the D&D, the Twitch, y'all have found these amazing ways to grab these kids. These kids are out there and y'all are pulling them in. And I mean, I'm just impressed with what everybody's doing. So awesome job.
I was just thinking of a creative experiment that I did a workshop on, that I modeled off of these two researchers in the UK. And basically what they did is they examined social media platforms, because we were talking about privacy a little bit earlier, and it was called the algorithmic self. And what they do in the workshop, which I model off of, is we had students kind of look at their Instagram profiles and their Facebook profiles to see what kind of advertising, like categories that they were placed in, which was really interesting. And what they did is, based on these different kinds of algorithms of what Instagram thinks that, the kind of persona that they are, they wrote a creative short story, poem, or drawing that kind of revealed their algorithmic self. And we had a whole discussion about, how it would be like to meet the algorithmic self, and, what would you do with that person? And it opened up a lot of like interesting ideas about these platforms that, we've been relying on it during the pandemic, of like how they perceive us digitally, right? So that was like a really interesting workshop that I'd like to continue in the future, where there's a disconnect of what these platforms see us, depending on like what we like and what we favorite on social media versus like who we are in real life. And I think that's like a huge thing that librarians should also kind of focus on as well, is like the principles of privacy when using these platforms, and like how important it is to defend your privacy when you're using them.
Chris, I know we've talked a little bit about privacy. We've talked a little about social media. Those of us who've been in this space long enough have watched certain platforms go away, and all of the user content go away as well. There's sort of a permanence issue. So what do you think, is there a role for libraries in helping people figure out how to not only collect and produce information, but to keep it somewhat independent and permanent?
Absolutely. It's so I did just post links to our Boston Public Library Teens YouTube channel and the Twitch channel that we've done. And the Twitch channel, because we've chosen not to monetize or commercialize that for obvious reasons, we have everything's on a 14-day timer. Basically, it disappears from the internet at that point. However, you can take that video file and hold it on a hard drive. I've been putting that material on YouTube, but as we all know, these spots are not guaranteed. These online archives are not guaranteed. And so I think that to address the question of permanency, I think if it were viable to have, I've had a conversation with a colleague of mine who actually, they and I started the Twitch channel together alongside a third colleague. And they are kind of a quintessential archivist librarian, and really advocate for holding on to artifacts that represent time periods, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that it'd be interesting to see libraries sort of explore how digital archives of programs can be collected and broadcast from library websites. I think it would be kind of obviously a very high or a very difficult threshold for libraries, because I think hosting online content, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know of any library systems that kind of do that actively, but I do think that now that so many library organizations are investing in tech that focuses on cloud storage services and things of that nature, that there might be on the horizon, there might be thought to how does a library maintain ownership, copyright, all of that stuff on the content that it is creating and it is putting out in the world. Because as we all probably know, and I don't know, Loraine or Tanner, I mean, Loraine, your story times are up, permanently. To me, when there's that aspect of permanency, there's a call to excellence that I think comes from that, knowing that you're being recorded, knowing that, what you're doing right now is going to end up on YouTube. When I knew I was being recorded as a teacher, my performance, not that it was ever poor, maybe sometimes, but it goes way up. And I think that it really does speak to, not that everything needs to be recorded, because certainly there are issues of privacy, but I think that what we are putting out in the world is a public service. And I think that if we can think proactively about which of those public services could remain services while being viewed passively, and how do we build an archive of that, just like we would build an archive of Renaissance art, which is not to equate what I'm doing on Twitch with Renaissance art, but also, to somebody somewhere, you know what I mean? Like there is, no quintessential difference between the two in terms of their value in understanding a snapshot of culture. And I think in particular, this is a time that my archivist friend and colleague, this is a time that we need to be documenting. I mean, I think this whole panel and this whole conference exists because we're going to be looking back and hearkening back to this particular past 15 months for a really long time.
Chris, I'm sorry I got a little distracted, but one of the things I meant to bring up was that program in Singapore where they built the story of the whole family history of everybody in Singapore. Remember that? And it was like this sort of brilliant concept, right, of the library as a repository of important historical information.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had conversations about, how I think there was some program recently, and it wasn't a teen-focused program, but we were talking about how it could parlay into teens, where I think people were invited to just set appointments where they would tell stories of the pandemic, and they would narrate short anecdotes, and those would be compiled into a digital archive that could be accessed, I think I would hope in perpetuity. But there are so many people with stories to tell, and those stories are of equal importance. And when I don't know, I go back to like Lorraine's story about the kids who kept watching her thinking she was falling over and how many times they engage with that program. And there's a degree to which I think, wow, there's content that Loraine has created that might be making sort of an indelible mark on these young kids because of, because to them, it's, her video is the same as, me reading to my little brother The Cat in the Hat every night for, 3 weeks at a time because he wouldn't stop demanding it. There's that kind of, I think there's that kind of value, intrinsic value to some of that content. And again, I'm not trying to say that, a team of librarians playing a video game with, teens from around the state and the world perhaps is of that same value, but at the same time, perhaps this is causing us to look at the intrinsic value of the programming that we're putting out into the world. And I think that's a positive thing because the value of that programming can only increase the more eyes that are on it, I think.
Did anyone find a way to have the community create content? Meaning, Loraine, you did your story hours and you're going on the walk, but did anybody find a way to bring in people from the community who then created content for other members of the community? And Chris, you are really reacting.
I'm very excited, but Lorraine's got spirit fingers happening right now, so I feel like Loraine should go first.
Yes, I had dual roles as the children's librarian, and then I did it as the children's librarian, and then I was for the junior auxiliary, I was the chairman of the Reading Railroad. We did the Reading Railroad virtually at the library, of course. We did it it's usually at the sportsplex, children come. We have like the police officers, local athletes read, Bully, we're in a college town, Bully, our bulldog, comes and reads. We give out books, they do crafts. Of course, we couldn't do that. So I did a drive-through event. We had a balloon arch. It was really fun. But what I did and got so much love from the community, I got the athletes at Mississippi State University to read. I got lots of female athletes, the basketball stars, softball, cheerleaders. I got baseball players, football players, and people all over the state. So for like the whole month leading up to our drive-through event, I would drop the videos of them reading. And of course, being again a college town, we had all kind of specialized books about like Bullies game day and things like that. But we had I would just take a crate of books to the different athletic departments. I would have, for the baseball, I would have baseball books, but then I would just have some general children's books, and I told them they could even request books. And so some of them would just read Dr. Seuss. They might request a favorite childhood book of theirs, or they may read a book about baseball. It was just so wonderful. The kids in the town look up to these guys. Just a little shout out. The boys just made it, our Diamond Dogs just made it to the College World Series. We're real excited. They were playing in Starkville this past week. So they're headed to Omaha. I mean, the whole town's excited. So it's just a way to get the kids, like I say, this is probably terrible to say, but I'll trick kids into loving to read, I don't care. I'll trick them however I can, getting their eyeballs, letting them, letting their heroes read these books, just getting them interacting. I'll do what it takes. And it's just amazing. They got thousands and each video got thousands and thousands of views from all over the state. And it was just incredible. And the college kids were so excited to be a part of this. they wanted to give back so much. And to me, that was really exciting because all of them had special, they would say, oh, this reminds me of this teacher, this librarian, this, my mom read this book to me. They all had a special memory, and that's very touching to me. Because the ones who volunteered to read were the ones who had an affinity for the books. And so we had great role models out there, and that was just exciting to me. I got so many people in the community out there reading to the kids. So it wasn't just plain Miss Rainey. I'd been reading at that point. I'd already done hundreds of videos with animals. So this was something separate. This was with the junior auxiliary, even though I was in charge of it. So it was put on the JA page. I was still doing my daily animal videos, but I was like, they're sick of seeing horses chew my hair and turkeys peck on me. So yeah, they loved it. So there
Chris?
you go. Now go, Chris.
Absolutely. So that's just so funny. The thing that I think we were most proud of as a teen gaming crew on our Twitch channel is actually something that didn't have anything to do with gaming. So we started branching off and doing non-gaming programming with partner organizations. Some of them were book discussion centered, but one of the sort of newcomers to Boston Public Library, a youth librarian by the name of Riche, had a connection with an organization called the Hip Hop Transformation, also located in Boston, actually just out of Boston in Cambridge. And he said, why don't we ask them about hosting a contest for teen music artists. So whatever type of music you produce, if you're a teen between 13 and 18, you could participate in this contest, submit all of your music digitally, which again was very friendly to the time. And we'll have a certain span of time. We'll kick off the event on Twitch. We'll host a workshop on Zoom. We will have an award celebration that I'm about to post in the chat on Twitch. The award celebration eventually is on our YouTube, which is what I'm going to share with people. And I got to say, it was a little touch and go. We got a trickle of submissions the first week, but then in very teen fashion, the last week we got over 50 different submissions from I think a total of 45 artists, which again is not thousands of people chewing on hair necessarily large, and yet at the same time we were really excited to be able to offer an opportunity for young artists to show off their wares, and in a post-event assessment where we asked very frankly, because we offered prizes and things of that nature, and we gave everybody, actually I have it and it's very cute, so I'm going to show everybody. We gave all of the musicians free Music Maker USB keys to store their future digital wares, at the end, we assessed, their sort of relationship to, or their reasons behind why they contributed. And part of the deal of submitting is that all contest entries would be hosted on our YouTube channel. And far and away, I think 80% of the respondents of the contest said they just wanted a place to display their music publicly. And so it was a really interesting, I think, awakening into, I mean, maybe they just wanted the gift cards that we gave away, but at the same time, I really have to think that so we actually offered opportunities for these kids to create new music and be paid by the library system. And so right now I have 5 commissions in process. So it's great that we parlayed that into actually paying teen artists to create more. I've just been incredibly impressed by this very raw talent pursuing this for the sake of creating art, right? There's a purity, I think, to before you have all the responsibility in the world of being an adult onto you, there's something great about being a teen, exploring artistry and being able to kind of do it for its own sake, which I think most artists would maybe advocate for, in general. And I've definitely learned that there is a need for this. We've already kind of booked budgeting for doing a next Teen Music Maker Showdown. Sorry if I didn't say the name of it, next year. And it far and away was our most well-attended Twitch event to this day. And it really sort of proved to me that there was a desire to showcase this talent. And there was a desire on the part of, library staff especially, but also other adults to watch it. So anyway.
That's so terrific. We like to give our audience a few minutes to close down, take a quick break. We have a whole set of sessions coming up and to get there on time. Loraine and Chris, you did a really good job wrapping up. Tanner and Junior, are there any sort of final things you'd like to say before we let you go with a huge round of thanks?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk more about like podcasts or privacy issues with me, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is Junior Tidal, and that's all one word. My last name is spelled like Tidal, like the wave. But thanks for having me on this panel. I think this is amazing, and the whole conference theme is needed. So.
Thank you all for having me. First of all, this was really great getting everyone's thoughts on continuing online services and making sure we're connected with our community. If anyone wants to email me about starting a gaming club or questions about Discord or anything like that, my email is, I'll put it in the chat, but it's tanner.adams@hcpl.net. So thank you all very much.
Okay, so huge thanks to each of you. Ellyssa, great job pulling the gang together. Chris, Tanner, Junior, and Loraine, thank you so much for being a part of this. We're going to stop now and let you all get to the next set of sessions. Thanks for being a part of this Library 2.021 mini conference today. Thanks. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.